The sun dipped low behind the red rock mesas of Sedona, casting long shadows across the dusty road. May Holloway stood on the edge of town, clutching a single suitcase in her trembling hand, her breath catching as she heard the clunk of her husband's pickup truck fading away. He didn't look back. He didn't stop. He simply drove off, leaving her stranded in the desert in a town she'd never truly belonged to. That moment changed everything. With the fairness of a sudden desert storm, everything she had thought stable and real shattered. May, an enormously large, plain-faced woman whom the world often saw and dismissed as unattractive, felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Not just abandoned, but erased. Her confidence, her home in Tucson, her hopes all vanished in that single roar of a truck engine. She stood still, the wind teasing wisps of her hair dust swirling around her boots. She looked at the jagged rocks ahead and wondered if the universe could truly be as indifferent as this landscape. Sedona's beauty felt cruel, mocking her pain, reminding her of how it glittered for others while she felt invisible. She had known shame before. People had stared at her size, her features, and whispered. Her husband had once called her beautiful in a fleeting moment, but now that word echoed hollow. In her mirror, she saw too much the fullness of her face, the roll of her body, the heaviness that every reflection magnified. And yet she had believed she deserved kindness, loyalty, a place to belong. This truck, driven by someone she once trusted, had carved away that belief. For the first time in her life, her ugliness felt permanent, not a judgment, but a sentence. But it was also the moment when something inside May began to shift, a spark igniting in the debris of her heartbreak. She braced her shoulders against the wind and looked eastward toward the winding path leading into the canyon. She felt a brutal clarity she would have to rebuild her life from scratch, or she might simply crumble amid the cracks. As the dusk deepened, May stumbled through Sedona's side streets toward a small diner still lit by neon. The red rocks glowed at sunset, surreal and vast, yet she felt infinitely smaller. She entered the diner, her footsteps heavy on the linoleum. Conversations hushed, eyes turned. Whispers hung in the air. Look at that woman. Why would anyone stay so close to him? She felt the sting not of cruelty exactly, but of judgment. At 42, she was older than many in that booth, broader than most, and painfully plain. And now, deeply broken. May sat at the counter, ordered coffee and toast. The waitress hovered uncertain, wary, but May breathed through it, steadying herself. She thought back to the wedding day, bright sunlight vows made hopes declared. He had promised her a life together. Now nothing remained but a ring, cold in her pocket, and a roaring truck fading on the horizon of red rock. The diner's coffee tasted bitter acrid, mirroring her reality. The sky shifted from crimson to indigo, and with it came the realization the world would continue turning, even as she reeled. Something darker inside her cried out. She looked around and noticed the jukebox in the corner half lit. Above it, 3 words, Wild West echoes. It felt like a sign. She remembered a story her grandmother once told her long ago about women at the frontier, scorned, abandoned, who survived by forging steel in their souls rather than giving in to despair. Women who refused to vanish quietly. That story whispered in her mind, you can be more than what they see. Over the next hour she listened. Strangers speculated about the truck's dump of its burden. Some offered pity. Most offered scorn. She felt them categorize her fat, ugly failures waiting to happen. But a small voice in her head rebelled. If she let others define her, she'd never reclaim her life. If she surrendered to shame, then what of the woman her grandmother had spoken of? What about May herself, layered, flawed human? Without fully realizing it, she began asking questions. To the waitress, where can I rent a room around here? to a drifter leaning at the bar. Know anyone offering work? To the cook shouting orders in the back. Can I wash dishes, sweep floors? Any job. Her voice was small but persistent, like the desert wind carving canyons. They gave her scraps of information. A back room at a roadside motel a mile out, kept by an older man named Hank. A local ranch that hires help cleaning tack-feeding stock. A small community center that needed someone to sweep floors and greet visitors. Each suggestion felt like a lifeline. By the time she left the diner and stepped into the chill desert night, May's grief had not vanished, but it had transformed from raw, festering wound into a subtle ember burning with necessity, not hope. She walked toward the glowing sign of Highway 89A, heart thudding with equal parts fear and resolve. She told herself, I'll show them, I'll show myself. I won't vanish because of my size or my face. I will survive, I will build something new. Her feet ached on the pavement, and her suitcase felt heavy in her hand, but each step into that cold night felt like a reclamation of identity, of agency. Singing softly under her breath, May whispered into the silence of the desert, I am May Holloway, and this desert will not bury me. In that stillness, the red rocks stood silent, guardians of her decision. She was nobody's shadow anymore. This abandonment would become the hinge upon which her new life turned. Sedona, with its ancient beauty and indifferent wind, would witness her transformation. And the stage was now set. May Holloway was no longer defined by ugly whispers or broken promises. She was about to become a force they never saw coming. He found May kneeling beside the old hitching post behind Hank's roadside motel arms, aching from dragging her suitcase down the sandy road earlier. Under the pale morning sun, Sedona's red rocks glowed softly, but inside May a heavy ache pulsed each breath, a reminder of everything she felt she carried. Her first shift had been sobering. The motel owner, Hank, was blunt. He'd handed her a stack of freshly laundered sheets and pointed toward the guest rooms, then walked away. May had heard the unspoken judgment in the way his eyes flickered to her size before turning away. She toiled quietly, pulling bedspreads into place, restocking towels, scrubbing bathroom tiles until her forearms trembled. Guests passed by without a word, some stared. Their pity or disgust winded her more than the hot desert breeze. That evening, as she scrubbed the linoleum floor behind the front desk, the weight of her body pressed into her bones like chains that no physical effort could pry loose. Every bend of her waist, every lift of a towel carried reminders, the eyes that dismissed her, the husband who abandoned her, without a backward glance, the world telling her she was too much. May's thoughts began to blur with the dust, too large, too ugly, too heavy. Yet the strange thing was this: for every aching muscle in her body, she felt another presence stirring inside something stubborn. When she leaned into each task, she clenched a quiet vow not to shrink. She sweated through her shirt, but didn't shrink away. She scrubbed floors until she felt burn, but she didn't falter. It wasn't pride, it wasn't defiance. It was necessity to persist, to remain, to prove to herself that physical weight did not equate to worth. At midday, a tan-colored pickup rolled up, and a boy stepped out about 17 with sun-bleached hair and a bright smile. He introduced himself as Travis, the ranch foreman, from just outside town, one of the places Hank had mentioned. They needed extra help in exchange for a small cabin and evening meals at the diner. May had hesitated at the offer the previous day, afraid they'd reject her out of appearance. But Travis met her at sunset in the motel's dusty parking lot and said, "We'll judge you by how you work, not the number on the scale. If you show up tomorrow morning, bring gloves." His eyes didn't waver. She nodded, careful not to let hope breed too quickly. That night, May lay on the cot in the tiny back room she rented behind the motel office. A bare bulb cast long shadows. The floorboard creaked beneath her, but not with fear, with the weight of unspoken questions. If I show up tomorrow, will they laugh? Will they pity me, fail me? Will I fail myself? Yet something else whispered, you have to know. When dawn came, May ate toast in the diner, nursed her coffee, then strapped on gloves and followed Travis's truck down a dusty ranch road toward a corral framed by red stone mountain peaks outside town. She'd never handled livestock before, but when Travis tossed her a bale of hay or directed her to her stall shoveling task, she dove in. Her hands blistered, her back ached. The sun beat down and turned her shirt sticky. But when she bent to brush a horse's flank or helped herd a small herd of cattle, something unexpected happened. The animals didn't judge. They merely responded, respectful nods in their mild eyes, warm noses pressed without shame. She found an odd comfort in their indifference to her, shaped their grace at her hands. Each brushstroke, each scoop of oats was a quiet affirmation, I am useful. I am steady. By noon, she'd built a rhythm, sweeping stalls, feeding animals, carrying water trough buckets. Passers-by ranch hands, visitors on horseback tours glanced. Some pie-bonged. That's the new maid? Others frowned, whispered to each other. May caught fragments. Look at her. She works that hard. Each comment felt like stones thrown. But she met them with silent persistence, head-low muscles, working focus on filling those buckets, bedding those stalls. Afterwards, Travis handed her a cold bottle of water. You did good, he said quietly. Thanks. His tone neither pitying nor complimentary, just plain recognition. May felt tears sting her eyes, not humiliation but gratitude and relief. I earned that. I deserve it. By evening, May's arms throbbed, and yet when she returned to Sedona town, she lingered by the art galleries perched against the sandstone. She watched tourists marvel at colorful paintings of red rock silhouettes. She remembered how invisible she had felt yesterday. Today, she felt present. Not pretty, not perfect, but present. I'm still here. She bought a small glass shard turned into a necklace, a piece of rose-colored quartz that caught the light. She pocketed it. A small token of survival. That night, back in her room, the ache persisted, but now it felt earned. She placed the necklace next to the crusted mug of coffee May had sipped that first morning. The contrast felt stark despair and determination side by side. She fingered the quartz and whispered quietly, this forsaken desert, these red mesas, they won't define me, but they will witness me becoming who I choose to be. In her dreams, the red rocks shifted shaped into canyon walls that enclosed her, but then parted to reveal endless horizons. She heard her grandmother's voice distant, you can forge steel in your soul, May. When she woke, she realized it wasn't about shrinking in the world. It was about expanding inside herself, forging resilience. The weight she carried was both burden and fuel. She had more to confront her own self-judgment, the town's scorn, the sting of physical exhaustion. But she also felt her mind grow sharper, noticing water patterns in the troughs, improving the feed mixture to stop the horses from coughing, cleaning the tack until it gleamed. She told Travis quietly, do you think if I learn proper saddle care help with the horses, I might stay longer? He paused, then offered, let's see how you feel after this month. You keep showing up working with care, there may be more. She nodded. If anything, her resolve solidified she would show up every day. Not for pity, not for promises, but to show herself that beauty wasn't only skin deep. Utility, kindness, perseverance that became her anchor. She would carry so much that her shape became less relevant than her spirit. By the week's end, the ranch hands had stopped whispering. Several offered quiet nods of acknowledgement. A couple asked for help carrying feed bags. One smiled when she handed him a freshly oiled bridle. May realized that through sweat and grit she'd earned silent acknowledgement, and it felt more powerful than laughter or pity ever had. That night, she stood again in Sedona's neon glow, walking past the Wild West Echo's jukebox in the diner. She pressed play. A mournful guitar riff cracked the silence. She watched the reflection of herself in the jukebox glass, larger than the reflection in her motel mirror, but stronger somehow. She raised her head. The reflection stayed. May Holloway carried weight, yes, weight of body weight of shame, weight of expectations. But she also carried the weight of resilience, the quiet proof of her hands creating order from chaos of her heart, forging courage in sorrow. And in that heavy weight she began to feel weightless. May woke before dawn the next morning, the air crisp with the promise of change. She carried her rose quartz pendant to the corrals, carefully securing it beneath her shirt, where only she would feel its pulse. The shame she had carried like stones in her chest felt raw and heavy. Today she intended to burn it. As she approached the horses, Travis was already there, saddling Midnight, a sleek, dark mare known for her gentle temperament. When he noticed May, he offered a nod. "Ready for today's lesson?" he asked quietly. Her answer came smooth, "Yes." Travis had invited her to join a branding session with ranch hands. It was work requiring precision patience and calm nerves. For May, it was also an opportunity, an invitation to prove something to herself and to the shadows of her past. Under the rising sun, the group moved through the pens. When it was May's turn, she gripped the hot iron with protective gloves, the coals glowing orange-red. Fear rattled inside her heat-pain pressure. She paused. In that hesitation, she saw something, the reflection of her own trembling hands in the smoke-tainted iron. For a moment, the shame threatened to rise, too big, too slow, too clumsy. But she breathed in the desert air and forced clarity. With firm concentration, she pressed the iron to a calf's flank, steady, deliberate. The sear, burned through velvet fur, imprinted a brand that signified belonging. The calf startled, but May held her hand steady until it was released. Sweat ran down her face, not from defeat but from focus. She exhaled, "I did this." Travis helped her cool the iron and gave her a small nod of respect. May barely registered it. Her real moment came as she watched the calf join the herd. A life branded into place, belonging not as a mistake but by identity and choice. She touched the iron at its base, feeling the tremor in her palm. The shame did not vanish, but it shrank, smoked away on the heat of her own courage. Later, when they returned the tools, May found the ranch hands packing feed and corners for an evening bonfire at the mesa overlook. Travis offered a half-smile. "You in?" May hesitated, not because doubt lingered in her mind, but because her body ached. "Still, I will follow this moment through." That night, the group gathered atop a plateau near Red Rock Crossing, horses grazing in the half-light. Someone lit a small bonfire, kindling, sparked, and rose in spirals of flame. Travis handed May a match. "Your shame," he said softly. She looked at him surprised. He shrugged his face gentle. She accepted. May's mind spiraled. She held the match above the fire, then strike flame blossomed. She let the match burn fully between her fingers, its red-orange glow lighting her expression. In her other hand, she released the rose quartz pendant, dropping it into the flames. The pendant glowed, then crackled, then broke apart, pink shards, melting smoke, rising into the night. It wasn't the pendant she mourned. It was the moment she surrendered fear. With its burning, the whispered voice inside that said, "You're worthless," went up in smoke. Her breath caught tears burning hot. Shame flickered in the firelight, then receded. Travis stood beside her. He said nothing, but his presence spoke trust and acceptance. Another ranch hand, Luke knocked on the wood crate beside the fire. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, voice tight. I am now. Around them, the group shared stories by firelight harvests, lost, sold homesteads, lonely early mornings. They spoke quietly of hard choices. May felt each word resonate. When her turn came, she took a small scrap of wood, etched her name in it, and tossed it into the flames. She told them how she'd been abandoned by Marcus, her husband, because of her looks and size. She spoke of the motel job that felt like rejection, and the cattle ranch work that started to heal her self-regard. She spoke of shame like a cloak she once wore, all of it ironed off by sweat and fire. By the end, the flames had eaten her nameplate. The smoke carried it away to the desert sky. May closed her eyes, chest expanding with the cool night air and release. Travis offered her his jacket. His back was turned only long enough to see her covered, and then he turned back, face unreadable but kind. Camp's open stay as long as you want. She let him help her on to midnight, and the ride down through the glowing mesquite fields felt lighter. May carried no apology in her steps, no hesitation. The desert stretched around them in gentle curves. She realized she had changed her form, had not, but her spirit had. Back at home, the aching body felt new soreness from honest effort, not punishment. May looked in the mirror and saw the same body, but she no longer recoiled. She traced the inside of her wrist where the pendant once lay, and imagined instead the iron brand that marked her someone who perseveres. In the days that followed, May emerged transformed. She joined Travis in horse training drills, learning to saddle properly, to care for tack and tack room. She developed a gentle bond with midnight whispering encouragement as they worked over rocky trail loops. She helped Travis teach a local girl how to brush and tack a pony. The girl about Tommy's age hesitated at her size, but May knelt beside her and guided her hands. When the girl looked up and smiled, May felt something settle deep. May began to host small evenings in the back room at Hank's Motel Quiet Time, with coffee for early risers. She opened the door early, inviting town ladies to come in before work for cinnamon rolls and discussion circles. They were hesitant at first. Some came only once. But gradually more arrived to share griefs, to laugh, to lean together. May facilitated each evening. She listened when women spoke of lost husbands, body shame, or broken dreams. She shared her journey, not for pity, but for honesty. She wore fitting clothes with bright scarves, letting the roses and purples express joy instead of conceal fear. She touched cheeks with kindness and let her voice be steady. You are more than what they say. Word spread. Some of the town's skeptical women began to soften. One morning, Sarah Billings, a heavyset widow who had avoided May, brought fresh citrus muffins. She offered it shyly. For the group, she said, "Thanks for letting me in." May accepted. Her heart brimmed. Meanwhile, Marcus May's ex didn't appear again. Rumor was he'd left Sedona for good, shamed by his own cruelty. May learned from Travis and the locals that she'd become something unexpected, a leader, a symbol, someone whose shame had become fuel. She had burned down the narrative that defined her. One late afternoon, as the sun sank behind Sedona's rock formations, Travis brought a note the motel's owner, Hank, wanted May to take over managing the front office. She blinked at the offer. Tears pricked her eyes. It wasn't about the job. It was recognition. Later, as May closed the office for the day, she looked at her reflection in the glass door. Her body was the same, yes, but she stood differently. Shoulders squared, eyes steady. Her heart carried no shame. She pressed her palm to the glass gently and exhaled a breath that felt deeper than she'd known she could draw. In the evening light, she whispered to herself, "I'm free now. I'm free to be me." And through the window, the red rocks of Sedona echoed back, persist. Belong. Rise. May woke to the slow warmth of dawn seeping into the cabin. The dry soil beyond the porch stood cracked and dusty evidence of many seasons without much forgiveness. But this morning, May felt a different pulse beneath her boots, promise, not desolation. Her first step outside was toward the garden patch she'd begun a few weeks earlier. Mostly gone untended for years, the fenced rectangle had become May's quiet sanctuary. She lifted a brittle sprout between sun-bleached rows of wilted corn and dead weeds. Kneeling, she pressed her fingers into the earth to feel its hardness. It resisted, but just a little less than before. She exhaled. "Come on, little one," she whispered, smoothing loose soil around the stalk. In the dry soil, every effort mattered. The iron brand, the bonfire, the community circle, all of it began to take root here. May paused and looked out toward the horizon, where the red mesas stood in contemplative steadiness. She could imagine roots stretching from under her feet into deeper layers of life, binding her to this land in ways she'd never felt before. Inside, as the coffee percolated, Travis emerged from the tack room carrying 2 mugs. May wrapped her hands around the heat. "Morning," he said. They had found a quiet rhythm actions more than words. "Garden needs planting?" he asked, nodding toward a packet of bean seeds on the windowsill. May's smile curved upward. "Yes. Today." After chores, they worked side by side. May cleared rocks and old chicken wire, preparing neat rows. She set seeds with precision, 4 per hole, 2 inches deep, following instructions Travis had given. She pressed the soil and watered it with a careful stream. She watched moisture bead on the dry crust and seep below. Each drop's disappearance was a small victory, proof that something would grow if tended. Travis clapped the last packet into his bag and gave her a look affectionate and incredulous. "You've got roots here, May." May's throat tightened at the weight and wonder of the phrase. Later, she visited the general store to gather ingredients for afternoon tortillas for the evening circle. The townsfolk greeted her differently, now eyes steadier, comments gentler. Mrs. Billings stood behind the counter. "May, darling, how's the garden doing?" she asked, leaning forward. May told her. The older woman nodded gravely. "I'm proud of you," she said. May blinked at the unexpected recognition. Though the words were simple, they grounded her deeper into belonging, not because of her size or appearance, but because of her resolve. That evening at Hank's motel back room, May prepared the circle again. The tray of tortillas and apple cider sat on a rickety table beneath lantern glow. Women filed in, some hesitantly, others returning with friends. May greeted each with warmth and saw hope reflected back in their faces. She began by sharing the garden metaphor to open the gathering. "We plant seeds even when the soil is cracked," she said softly. "We water them with our choices. With care, those little seeds grow into roots that hold us steady." One woman spoke of her own cracked ground, Marisol, whose husband left her when illness struck their child. She described humiliation at social events and her fear the world saw her as broken. May nodded, kneading dough with purpose. "You are not broken," she said firmly. "You are resilient even in barren places. Let's plant something together." She passed Marisol a seed packet and asked her to plant a reminder in her own patch of life, something small and intentional. Another woman, Lydia, a tall, slender artist who had quietly watched May in town, raised her cup. "I've always admired your courage," she said. "Most days, I hide behind my brush because I don't want to stand out. You taught me I can grow even when I feel unnoticed." The group nodded quietly. May's heart pulsed with tenderness. They came seeking courage, and found it someone had dared share first. Afterwards, May stepped outside into the gentle summer night. The mesas were black silhouettes, and only the garden patch in moonlit glow showed evidence of her morning work, defined rows, smooth soil promise. She leaned against the porch post and stared up at the stars scattered across the high desert sky, each like a distant spark in her own small universe. In that moment, she felt roots extending outward and downward, ties to land, to community, to a purpose bigger than loneliness. A sense of momentum hummed within her. She had planted beans, but she had also planted trust in herself and others. She had begun something that would not vanish with distance or time. Later, as she tucked Tommy into bed, the boy clutched a small clay pot where he'd planted a sprout of sunflower seeds. His face gleamed with pride. "I want to grow taller than the wind," he declared. May tucked the blanket tighter. "You will," she whispered. "Roots run deep, boy, deeper than you know." At midnight, May found herself walking back to the garden. The moon was high cool light reflecting on the soil's texture. She knelt and ran her fingers through the rows. Some seeds were submerged, others remained visible. She touched one where the soil was too compacted, pressed lightly and loosened it. Later, she would come with water. For now, the act of tending felt sacred. She whispered into the night wind, "Grow." Across the mesa, the red rock walls seemed to lean toward her majestic patient. In the following days, little signs began to emerge. Tiny emerald shoots broke through the earth. May's eyes brimmed when she saw the first bean vine unfurl. Travis caught her smiling at the seedlings. "Look at those roots," he said softly. She reached out to touch a delicate leaf so new and fragile, and breathed. They found a way. May's own roots deepened too. She began volunteering at the elementary school, reading to children on Fridays, sharing poems she wrote about self-acceptance, courage, and belonging. The students listened raptly. One child, overweight and shy like May, had looked up with admiration in her big eyes. That child tucked themselves into her arms afterwards. May cradled them gently. She said quietly, "You are enough." At the ranch, May joined civic discussions. She stood before the town council to propose a community garden project, a shared plot where every resident could plant seeds, cultivate growth, and share harvests regardless of background, body size, or status. Her voice carried steady calm. Afterward, the mayor shook her hand. "You've given us roots in the dry soil, too," he said. May closed her eyes briefly to steady the tears behind the warmth of recognition. That night, May returned to the garden, now dotted with small green stems reaching tentatively for sky. She whispered her routine affirmation, "Grow." Behind her, midnight neighed softly. Travis stood without a sound watching the plants and May tending them. She turned, and he offered a crisp towel to wipe the sweat from her brow. Their eyes locked. No words were needed. She felt grounded, seen, and trusted in ways she had never allowed herself before. May carried the weight of her past shame less and less because she had rooted herself in purpose. She had grown into her own strength and slowly taught others to grow too. Where cracks once revealed hopelessness, new life was springing forth from parched earth and wounded hearts alike. In this chapter, May's outward action, tending the dry soil, mirrors her inward transformation. She learns to grow roots where none existed, to nourish community and to stand steady. The final image lingers May surrounded by tiny green shoots, hands muddy spirit, unbreakable at home. In the dry land she helps heal. May Holloway arrived at a pivotal moment. The garden she planted now thrived, small green bean vines intertwining across the cracked rows. But beyond that, something elemental stirred deep within her, a fire that transformed shame into strength, loneliness into purpose. It was no longer just about roots and dry soil beneath her feet. It was about the blaze she was becoming. Morning found her preparing to lead the community circle at the new shared garden, an initiative born from her vision and tireless work. Neighbors gathered beneath the shade of a makeshift pergola woven with plants. The mesa cliffs glowed red in sunlight. May stood in front, her shoulders squared, her presence calm but commanding. The women's faces looked back at her with a mixture of anticipation, quiet awe, and affection. She remembered the beginning, abandoned, ashamed, left by her husband, because of how she looked, how she carried the world's judgment in her flesh. But here now she stood no longer shrinking from others, but openly lifting them up, giving others tools to build their own hope. She began softly, almost whispering, "Fire can destroy. Fire can also forge. Today, I offer this place as a forge for what we dare to become." She spoke of how shame had once shaped her, how her husband's abandonment nearly extinguished her will, convinced her beauty, disqualified her worth. "I was told I was too big, too ugly, not enough," she said. "But I learned that fire is not about being consumed, it's about being purified into something stronger." She invited each woman to share a spark, a moment of shame that had silenced them, and to pass it into a shared bowl of sage embers. One by one they came forward. Marisol spoke of guilt over a child she couldn't save while she was ill. Lydia confessed to hiding her art for fear of being judged too different. Even large Mrs. Billings shared regrets of pushing others aside in her own pain. May accepted every spark with kind solemnity, guiding the sage smoke to swirl upward, carrying their shame off into the desert sky. The air felt electric, a ritual of release, purification, communal fire. Then May collected the bowl and added her own spark, her weight and abandonment, and gently lifted her gaze. "I offer you all of me. The shame I carried once now, shared now, transformed." She closed the circle and called them forward one by one to step barefoot into a narrow line of smoldering bricks laid across the soil, symbolic firewalk. A few hesitated. May was first. She placed her foot carefully on the warm stones. The heat prickled but did not harm. She took a breath and walked across. Women gasped, then cheered, then followed. Each one emerged on the other side with tears, smiles, a new sense of victory over their own burdens. When the last woman stepped off the bricks, May looked out at them, faces, shining eyes alive. After May turned to the shared garden. "Now we plant," she said. She handed every woman seed sunflowers for strength, beans for endurance, wildflowers for joy. They scattered them across bare soil, pressing in with unity. They watered together from buckets passed hand to hand. Maya placed the final sunflower seed in the center row. May's heart swelled garden and community nourished by collective fire. That afternoon, as the sun lowered behind the mesas, May walked the land. The garden rows curved in neat arcs, now sprouting life. Children chased each other between bean vines. Townsfolk tended plots. Beneath the wide sky, everything pulsed with possibility. She felt the heat of the day in her bones, no longer shame, but pure fire creation, transformation, empowerment. May paused by the pergola under which Lydia hung her first sunflower painting as a symbol of bloom. Travis joined her hands, dusty, but gently offering a cool cloth. Silence passed between them, solid, comforting. May offered him a small smile, one of gratitude and acknowledgement. He had watched as she changed not into someone unrecognizable, but into someone fully herself, bold, generous, and lit with conviction. Even Tommy ran circles around her feet, chasing locusts and singing nonsense songs. She knelt to hug him. "You're doing good things too, boy," she told him softly. He threw his arms around her neck. "I want to be fire too," he whispered. May lifted his chin. "You're already warmth, my boy." As dusk settled, the circle reconvened to share reflections. Each woman spoke strength, peace, intention, change. Mrs. Billings declared she would open her home weekly for those seeking a safe space to talk. Marisol vowed to join May in teaching garden care to neighborhood children. Lydia offered to display more art in the public square. Through each blossoming idea, May listened with fierce tenderness. She knew the fire she became was not about spectacle. It was about community being ignited, growing beyond past struggles. That night, May stood alone by the garden in the silver moonlight. The air smelled faintly of sage and earth and green stalks unfurling. She took a deep breath. The embers in her chest glowed warm. She had burned the shame. She had forged herself anew. She had built roots deep in soil, but now fire raged within her purposeful illumination, guiding others forward. 3 days later came the council election. The mayor, speaking publicly, tapped May forward. He announced that on account of her leadership resilience and community vision, the Community Garden Project would become official town-sponsored and open to all. May was given a seat on the committee to advise on social initiatives. She accepted with measured humility and fierce pride. Her fire was not extinguished or contained, it spread. It inspired the town's council to create a wellness circle for others, struggling to host art exhibitions focused on body positivity, and most memorably to hold an annual Fire Walk Day in May's honor, a ritual of personal liberation for anyone carrying shame. Looking out over the table's ceremony held in the garden, May remembered the person she had once been, unseen, shamed, abandoned. But now she smiled at the women walking barefoot across the warmed bricks, at children planting seeds at neighbors, sharing stories under lanterns hung in the pergola. This was home. This was fire. This was purpose. In the final moments, Travis and May walked along the pergola path as lanterns swayed. Tommy trailed behind, lighting the first sunflower seedlings with measured care. May squeezed Travis's hand. "Thank you for seeing me," she whispered. He replied without words, just a steady, warm gaze that said everything. The fire she became did not burn others, it illuminated their path. It made cracked soil flourish. It showed that a woman judged by looks, abandoned for flesh, could rise into something fierce, transformational, undeniable. And now she invited others to walk beside her in that glow. Early one dawn, just as the pale light began to soften the rugged mesa horizon, May Holloway woke to the sound of frantic hoofbeats echoing through the silent valley. Something felt wrong before she even opened her eyes. She bolted upright, heart pounding, and rushed outside to see riders galloping toward the garden, dust clouds chasing them like pressing shadows. Tommy woke moments later, rubbing sleep from his eyes. People coming," he stammered. May gathered him into her arms, her instincts warning of danger. She saw Travis already outside, his face-drawn rifle slung over one shoulder. The townsfolk who had once supported her now scattered, murmuring confusion, fear, something darker edging in their eyes. The riders slowed abruptly at the gate to the garden, pulling up just beyond the flowering pergola that May had built. At their head rode a figure May recognized immediately, Samuel Porter, the bitter father of one of the women who once joined her circle condolences no more. His face was grim, jaw clenched, and beyond him rode men she knew by name. Former settlers turned opponents when Walker's gang began stirring trouble. May opened her mouth to call out, but Travis gripped her arm. "Stay here," he whispered. "I'll handle it." But May shook her head. Despite her internal fire, Tommy looked fragile in her arms. "Don't she send him inside?" She met Travis's gaze. "Be careful." Porter dismounted first, then his men spaced out before the garden. Rose rifles casually rested across saddles. May backed away but stood tall on her patch of soil. Porter's voice broke the dawn calm May Holloway. "We're here to take this garden and this town back. You think you got people on your side. You're alone now." Shock stunned the circle of neighbors who had gathered, women, children, townsfolk hoping for peace. Betrayal cut through them like a blade. May felt the ground beneath her shift. It wasn't only soil that cracked, it was the fragile trust she'd built. Before May could respond, Porter raised a parchment and hissed, "This valley and these lands were patented before you came. Your committee seat is worthless paper. This garden is illegal. Evacuate or face consequences." One of May's women, Marisol, stepped forward, trembling but resolute. "You can't just drive us out," she said. "This place is community now. It's not just for her." Porter sneered. "You'll learn what happens when you defy what's legal." Travis stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of May, his face taut with protectiveness. "You step 1 foot into this garden against our will, you answer for it." Porter signaled with a nod. 2 riders advanced slowly, rifles raised. The atmosphere snapped to dangerous clarity. Children cried, townsfolk backed away. May felt Tommy cling to her skirt, silent fear in his small eyes. But then, from the east, a rising chant broke the tension, the rhythmic beat of drum and voices. The elders she had honored in the council, the medicine women she had fed and empowered 3 days ago, they emerged across the arid plain, forming a line of dignified resolve. Slowly, another group joined them. Lydia's art students' men. Marisol had taught gardening to even a few wives of Porter's own men stepping forward. The riders froze, uncertainty flickering across their faces. Porter's facade, cracked eyes narrowing. May realized this was no longer just about paper or precedent. This was about values, soul community, and the fire she had sparked had spread further than she knew. The council elders began chanting in unison, their voices steady roots and fire garden, and heart leave no destruction, break no trust. It was a ritual, neither violent nor tame, just elemental truth. Travis relaxed, slightly lowering his rifle a fraction. May's knees were weak, but she stood firm, watching as villagers once distant lined beside her. That solidarity blasted through every fear Porter had planned to exploit. Porter tried again, voice trembling, "This is legal writ." But the chant rose louder, drowning his words. The crowd's presence made it impossible for him to act. Fear replaced bravado. He spat at the ground, turning his horse. "We'll see how long this lasts," he snarled. Riders wheeled dust rising behind them like a retreating ghost army. May felt the world shift again as they left, no shot fired, no blood spilled, but the confrontation left tremors in the evening air. In the aftermath, May sank to her knees beside Tommy, wailing, laughter turning to tears. She held him, trembling with adrenaline and relief. Travis dropped beside her, wrapping an arm around both of them. Later, as night descended and the crowd dispersed under violet skies, May walked the garden rows alone. The earth felt alive, resilient beneath her feet. She realized that confrontation and unexpected solidarity had marked a transformation stronger than any sun-drenched harvest. When she returned to the pergola, she found neighbors gathering. One man from the general store stepped forward, a soft, apologetic face. "We were wrong," he said quietly. "We thought you were changing the town, but you saved it. Helped us see what mattered." Others nodded. Tears and forgiveness mixed with pride. Marisol came to her holding a small box. "For you," she said softly. Inside was a copper talisman engraved with fire shapes flame and sage roots and seed, for what you've built and what you protect. May's heart thundered. She stood in the center of that circle, no longer abandoned, no longer merely surviving, but defending everything she had sparked into life. 3 days later, the town council held an emergency meeting. Under pressure from many citizens, plus the visible presence of the medicine women and elders, the mayor rescinded the challenge papers. The garden was not only preserved, it was declared historic land tied to community healing. And May was granted formal recognition not just as a committee member, but as guardian of Harmony Gardens. a title bold, resonant, irrevocable. That evening, as lanterns lit the pergola and vines shimmered in the warm breeze, May addressed the gathered crowd. "I thought my fire was only about me," she said, voice echoing in the hush. "But fire is not ownership, it's transformation. You all bravely joined. You refused division. You remembered what it means to build together." She looked at Travis Tommy, her friends, the old elders who still bore weight but stood taller. "This garden is no longer mine. It's ours. It's the heart of what we can be rooted, resilient, radiant." They cheered, fists raised, tears shining. May felt roots deep as rocks anchoring her and fire burning wild within. If May's moment of courage, unity, and unexpected twist moved you, please subscribe and tap the bell to support the channel. Your subscription fuels stories like this, stories of resilience, hope, and transformation that could light up many more lives ahead.